All right, welcome. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here. Really excited to learn from you. One of my favorite quotes is, when one person teaches, two people learn. So every opportunity I have to go and share, I'm always taking notes and trying to incorporate that into the work that I do. And I want to start off by saying what you're doing and what you're starting to do here under Troy's leadership and the rest of the group here in Singapore is truly world class. And I don't say that everywhere I go. I've been very fortunate to speak all over the world and work with coaches at all levels, all sports, and this is world-class work that you're doing right here. So you should be very proud of the work that you're doing. And I'm sure we'll see other countries around the world will want to come and visit and learn and observe and see what you're doing as you keep growing this. All right, so what we're going to do, I actually have a few sessions here as part of this event. So this is meant to be kind of an introduction into these two questions. What is quality coaching, and how do you become a quality coach? So I'm going to kind of set the stage. I'll share some examples, and then later this afternoon we'll actually do a more extended session on how you coach well. And then tomorrow will be interactive. We're going to teach a class. Basically, we're going to do a workshop on helping you become a better coach. And I put a picture here of Steve Kerr. He's the head coach of the Golden State Warriors, one of the most successful sports teams in the world at the moment. And they have built a tremendous culture of quality coaching. And I'm going to share some examples from some of the work that they do. And just to give you a little bit of a background on where these ideas are coming from. So this is a chance for me to share what I've learned and what I've seen. And I'm very fortunate in that I get to work in that gap between research and practice. And John talked about theory and practice. I have to do that every day. In a typical day, I can go from teaching a class at a university to coaching, to working with a coach at the college level, to working with coaches at the school level, to having a phone conversation with an Olympic coach or a national team coach, and then supervising graduate students who do research on coaching. So every day I'm trying to make sense of, okay, what does the research say? How might that actually work in coaching? What do great coaches do? And try and work in that gap. And then I also get to work with a lot of different associations and share that. And then I also put an image here of the International Sport Coaching Journal. And that's a recently launched journal that, again, we're trying to work in that gap between theory and practice. So we want to share the best research and share as much as possible what great coaches do. And this is an image I always like to start with. This is an aerial view of a neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona, in the United States. And the reason I share this with you is because it's very normal for us in our everyday work to stay at street level. So imagine you own one of these homes. You spend a lot of time in your yard, in your driveway, maybe talk to a couple of your neighbors. That's like you as a badminton coach or a netball coach. You spend a lot of time around netball coaches in the world of netball. But how often do we really step up and look from above and really see the whole neighborhood of coaching? And it's very clear when you do a flyover, when you step back, you can see the patterns, right? You can see the principles. Say, oh my gosh, look at all these, it's obvious. But we don't see that. We're embedded in our everyday work. So what I've tried to do today in both sessions is kind of share a flyover. So we're going to look at what are those patterns and principles that we see when we look across sports, we look across disciplines that can help us be better coaches. So we're going to start with what is quality coaching. If we want to get better at coaching, we have to start with identifying what is better. What is the goal here? How do we know if someone is a good coach? What does that look like? This is an image of a guy named Justin Langer. He's one of the great cricket players out of Australia. He's now a coach there, professional coach, also coached their national team. And I've had a chance to work with the cricket coaches in Australia, and this is the kind of person that embodies a lot of the things we're going to share with you today. And I like this example because I want to, again, share examples of research and practice, but sometimes I feel we overcomplicate things, don't we? You know, we're looking for some elaborate answer or model. If we just step back and ask simple questions like this, we can make a big improvement and a big difference in our work. And this is an example from a guy named Augie Garrido. He's a legendary baseball coach in the United States, and he coached at the college level. And he always likes to ask this question when he talks to coaches who want to get better. He said, strive to be the coach that you always wanted to play for. And I think that's a really powerful message when we think about what is good. We put ourselves on the other side of that equation, and we ask yourself, before you go out to a training session, do I think my athletes would enjoy this today? If I was on the other side of this, if I was on the pitch, if I was on the field, would I enjoy this session today? So keep coming back to our athletes. What would our athletes enjoy? Some of this is a bit of repetition or reinforcement from what John Bale shared, which I think is fine, because I'm also going to introduce you to some of the principles from Coach John Wooden, considered one of our greatest coaches ever. And one of his laws of learning was repetition, 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 repetition. So it's not bad to hear the same messages over and over again. And this is, at the moment, I think, one of the best examples from a global perspective of people coming together and trying to identify and answer that question, what does good look like? What does good coaching look like? And this is our International Sport Coaching Framework. And I'm going to start with it, and I'm going to end with it. So I'm going to show you how we got to this point and some of the other examples that fit into this and why I think this is so valuable. So a few years ago, I worked with one of the leading talent development researchers in the world. His name is Jean Cote. He's from Canada. He's also on the IOC group for athlete development. And he approached me and he said, you know what, Wade, if we're going to keep doing research on coaching, and you have to keep in mind that there's not a long history of research on coaching. You know, if you look in a field like psychology, we have 400 years of research. If you look in coaching, the science of coaching, we have maybe 40 years, maybe 40, 45 years. And so we don't have this massive database of research on what good looks like. It's really only in the last few years that we started to do this more systematically. And he said, you know, there's a lot of people asking me about what are some good research papers, how should we define good coaching, but we really don't have a good definition of that. And so we spent about a year and we went all over the world and we looked into all the literature on good coaching. So for example, if you went online and you typed in a Google search, definition of good coaching, what would you get? If I went into a research database and I typed in the science of coaching, what is the definition of good coaching? What would you get? And what we found is these are some of the actual terms that we found when we just did a search for good coaching. Sometimes we call it quality, virtuoso, elite, expert, master, award-winning, holistic. How can we define something if we can't even agree on what to call it? So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what is the next step here. And in fact, I'll show you what we came up with, our definition. But if we look at some of the research that's coming out recently as we start to build this database of evidence of what good coaches do at all levels, we see some examples like this published in our journal not too long ago. And I'll leave this up for a minute just for you to absorb that. This is a picture of what we found with doing research on great coaches, people who bring athletes to the highest level, but also develop good relationships and build athletes, build better people through that process. And you see your philosophy as a coach is central to that, understanding who you are as a coach, what your approach is as a coach, and then tying that into a vision, creating the right environment, so the environment around you, and then connecting with people. We're keeping in mind that at the end of the day, this is about you are in the business of people. You build people. Your palette or your medium just happens to be netball or badminton or archery or soccer. In a sense, you're an artist. Your palette happens to be your sport. So we're in the business of building people. And you see that with the best coaches. And so these are some of the key themes that we're going to go through over the next few sessions. But I wanted to introduce you to one of our best coaches ever. And so when we come back to these models and these definitions, we want to see real examples of these things in action. What does that really look like? And this is John Wooden, and you see here the title of this book, The Greatest Coach Ever. And, you know, that's debatable, of course, but anywhere I go around the world, any sport, people know John Wooden. I inevitably meet people with a Coach Wooden book on their shelf. And I think one of the reasons he is, in fact, right over here, one of the boards is Coach Wooden's definition of success. You know, he coined that 60 years ago. He talked about things that are sustainable and enduring. It was as good then as it is today. It's still timeless in a sense. And I think one of the reasons we come back to Coach Wooden a lot is he was successful, both from a performance perspective, but he was trained as a teacher. He started out as a teacher, a school teacher, and he always viewed himself as a teacher. And we actually have, arguably, the very first study on good coaching was a study done on John Wooden in 1974, his last year of coaching. And it was at UCLA. He was a basketball coach, and two researchers decided to sit in the gym and just watch him in all his practices and take notes on just his behaviors. Just what was he doing? What was this great coach doing? And this is a reprint of their results, their main results. And I just wanted to highlight, to reinforce a point here, at the top, you see 50%, half of every word that came out of his mouth for an entire year of training was related to teaching. Very systematic, very deliberate. He spent 3 hours a day, every day across his career, planning his practices. That's the first thing he did in the morning. And so they were amazed. When you think about if someone went and observed you in training and recorded every word that came out of your mouth, 50% of it was directed specifically at teaching. And he really didn't spend a lot of time giving praise to athletes or scolding them. He really was about teaching. Good coaching is teaching. And thankfully he lived to 99. So we had lots of time to talk to him about those results. And I worked at UCLA for a little while, and I had a chance to connect with him and work with groups who've worked with him. And they went back 30 years after that study, and they asked him, they said, you know, Coach, remember that study? Remember that year we hung out in the gym and watched you? Could we ask you some questions about that? And he was in his 90s at this point, and he said, yeah, for sure. And he was sharp. He could remember all these things. But these are some of the things that really stood out. This incredible attention to detail and planning. So these are things we saw with the study, arguably the first study of good coaching. And he also was very economical with his instruction and his talk, which is very helpful for athletes. And when you understand the learning and the teaching and learning process, less is more. Give people a few cues and get out of the way. We way overcoach. He discovered this on his own. And then they found this pattern of instruction that they called Wooden's, which was stopping an athlete to give them instruction by giving them positive modeling, so showing them the right way to do something, then show them the way they did it, so the negative modeling, and then show them the right way again. And so it's not just telling them, it's physically showing them so that they can see, because we learn best by touch and feel and motion, and so as much as we can show our athletes, the better. So this is in the 1970s, and now we have research, all kinds of research, to show that this works. So here's a great coach who is discovering this on his own, and now we just have science and labels to attach to it, say, yeah, you know, all that stuff he was doing, it works. He knew it. And so the theme here that I want you to take away from this session really is good coaching is teaching. The essence of coaching is teaching. And I remember a few years back, I got a phone call one day in my office, and it was a lawyer. And he just wanted to ask me some questions. And I thought it was kind of odd, but in fact what he was doing was interviewing me for a project. He didn't tell me that, so I said, okay, I'll answer your questions. And one of his questions was, do you know the meaning of the word coach? And I thought about it, and I said, no, someone who coaches, I don't know, I never really thought much about it. And he said, well, you're supposed to be a world-leading expert in this, and you don't know the root of this word or the definition of this word. And I said, well, why don't you tell me? And he said, okay, so the root of the word coach, that word comes from Old England, Old English, and 300-400 years ago, when we had aristocrats or nobles traveling around Europe and by horse and carriage, and they would have their children in the back in the carriage, and they would have a tutor, someone traveling with them around Europe, to teach their children so that they could learn. But it was that name of that carriage was a coach. So the children traveled in the coach with a person who instructed them, and that person became known as a coach. So the root of the word is teaching. It all comes back to teaching. And so we want to remember when we're interacting with our athletes, we're designing training sessions, everything we do should come back to teaching. Think like a teacher. So when in a school, for example, when a student makes a mistake on a math test or doesn't understand a math question, we don't punish them. We don't say, okay, everybody out to the track, we're going to run. Or you're going to get down and give me 50 push-ups. What do we do when a kid on a practice field makes a mistake in a game or in a practice? We often resort to making them run or giving them some kind of physical punishment. We're not teaching them, we're punishing them. Think like a teacher. And this has been replicated in many, many, many studies where we see this idea that the best coaches are teachers. They spend most of their time on teaching and learning and instruction. Focus on teaching. So I want you to hear from Coach himself. And I've been very fortunate to work with Coach a little bit and people who've worked with him, and we have this nice database of interviews with him. So this is just a short clip from Coach Wooden. This is in his home, and he's in his 90s. I think he was 93 here. So think about this if you know anyone in their 90s and their ability to articulate these kinds of things. Okay, we'll come in here. Maybe just, I'm having trouble getting the cursor on it. Let's pull this down. Okay, here we go. I think that'll do it.
They use the winning percentage there, and that's not an accurate way of judging a success. So I wanted to come up with something of my own, and I think there were three things that entered into it. One was Mr. Scheidler's class when we discussed success and came up with our own definitions. Then my dad, about never trying to be better than someone else, learn from others, and never cease trying to do the best you could be. And then about that time, I ran across a verse, and always being interested in verse that makes a point. Just one little simple said, "At God's footstool to confess, a poor soul knelt and bowed his head. I failed," he cried. "The Master said, thou didst thy best." That is success. I think those things, more than anything else, accounted for my own definition. And I did this in 1934, and the definition I coined for success is peace of mind, attained only through self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to become the best of which you're capable. Now, we're all equal there. We're not all equal as far as intelligence is concerned. We're not equal as far as size. We're not equal as far as appearance. We do not all have the same opportunities. We're not born in the same environments. But we're all absolutely equal and having the opportunity to make the most of what we have and not comparing or worrying about what others have. And I coined that in 1934. And then later started working on my pyramid, and I worked on that for the next 14 years, placing success according to my definition at the apex.
Okay, so you have a little example there of Coach Wooden talking about success, his definition of success, and how it relates back to teaching and learning, doing your best, and providing the support to do your best. And you may have seen this before. This is his pyramid that he created. But what's interesting about this pyramid is that he created this for the learner. So this is for the athlete. And these are in his mind, these were the building blocks for becoming a great athlete, a great learner. And so this wasn't really for the coach. This was something he would use with his athletes. And we had a chance to work with him a little bit. And we said, what if we had a version of this for the coach? What would the coach's pyramid look like? So this is his pyramid for the athletes, for the learners. And so a group of us, at the bottom here you see a guy's named Ronald Gallimore. He was the scientist who did the first study of Coach Wooden. He's one of those guys who sat in that gym for a year in 1974. And then Swen Nader, who played 10 years in the National Basketball Association in the NBA and won 2 championships with Coach Wooden as a player. So we have the scientist, the player, and some researchers and educators. And we asked Coach Wooden, what would it look like if we had a pyramid for the coach? What would that look like? And this is what we came up with. And I can share these articles with you, and the presentations will be available if you want, so you don't have to worry about writing too much of this down. But I just want to show you how this relates to teaching and success and his definition of success. So just for a moment, if I go back here, and I'll let you look at that one again. If you had this on one side, this is for the athlete. You flip it over, this would be for the coach. And these were the building blocks that this was not a scientific study, but it was a group of us reflecting on our collective experiences, saying, what might that pyramid look like for a great coach, a successful coach? And I want to share a story with you. You notice the strongest points of a pyramid are the corners, the blocks in the corner. The 2 blocks here are love and balance. They're placed there specifically because they are the most meaningful, at least from Coach Wooden's perspective. That love, in his mind, love was the most important word in the English language. And it's funny, when we were trying, so this was published in a journal, a scientific journal, and when we were trying to publish it, this was at a point where there was another scandal. There always seems to be scandals, especially in youth sport. We have another one now in the United States with gymnastics. At this point, when we were trying to publish this, it was swimming, of coaches abusing children. And so the editors of this journal were quite sensitive to this and said, we can't put out the message to great coaching starts with love. Love your athletes. They said, this is just bad timing. Okay, you need to pick a different word. And for me, it was just a word. And so I went back to the other authors and Coach Wooden and said, let's change the word love to some other word. Find a synonym for love. And Coach Wooden said, if you change the word love, I will not endorse this. It has to be the word love. And the way we define love here is acting in the best interest of your athletes. Doing what is best for them. It's about them, not you, right? It's about your truly serving your athletes, not yourself, serving your athletes. So I had to go back and forth about 3 or 4 times with this editor in this journal. He said, look, you got the greatest coach ever saying it has to be love. And they were saying, no, it's too sensitive. We can't use the word love. So I did more research and I dug into autobiographies and biographies of great coaches across history. And this word love kept coming up over and over and over again. In fact, there's a legendary football coach in the United States, Hall of Famer, and his first line of his autobiography was, coaching is about love. I said, if it's love for the best coaches of all time, it's love. Take it or leave it. So we ended up convincing them, and so love is one of those cornerstones. And when we look at this pyramid, while we were doing this, I was also doing this study on athlete development and trying to come up with a definition of coaching expertise from a scientific perspective. So we have the practical and the science happening at the same time. And when we looked at this, I look across this bottom row. This whole bottom row, the foundation of great coaching, is about people skills. It's all about people skills. Connecting with your athletes, relationships, empathy, love, balance in life. So for Coach Wooden and these great coaches, the foundation of what we do is people, connecting with people. The next level is about you. So the first level is about your athletes. The second level is about you. who are you as a person, as a coach? And this comes down to initiative and reflection and passion and desire to keep learning and to keep getting better. The best coaches have to want to get better. You don't have to be mandated to get better. The best coaches are going to do all these things regardless of what Troy and his group do here. They're going to go out and they're going to get better. The heart of the pyramid is teaching. The heart of the pyramid right in the center is teaching. Knowing how to teach, knowing what to teach, and then having the physical and mental condition to teach it. Because teaching is hard. And you know that. You know that from coaching. It's exhausting. To do it well is mentally and physically exhausting. So you need to know how to teach, you need to know what to teach, and then you need to be conditioned to be able to do that well. So you have to be, the center part is really about teaching and staying conditioned as a coach. The top, again, you have teacher right at the top. But I like the block on courage and commitment, those two blocks, because oftentimes as a coach, we're faced with dilemmas. Every day we have dilemmas. You have moments. Great coaching is about navigating moments. All these little moments. Do I discipline an athlete? Do I hold an athlete off a team? Do I make them do extra work today? All of these little moments. And so there's going to be many moments when you know the right thing to do. Do you have the courage to do it? And that's what really separates great coaches from average coaches. Because average coaches know what they should have done, those hard decisions, but they didn't have the courage to do it. And great coaches have the courage to do those hard things. And then finally you see his definition of, or our definition working with him of success, which is similar to the original definition, that peace of mind and knowing that you did everything you could, but doing everything you could to help that person grow and develop. If you can go to, whether you finish last or first or win the medal or don't win the medal, if you can put your head down on your pillow at night knowing you did everything you could do to help that person grow, that's success. You've done all you can do. And I'm going to skip this video just because it's very similar to the previous video, so we're going to move on here. But we come back to, so we have our global framework for coaching excellence or good coaching. We have our pyramid. Now let's see what the definition is. So the definition that underpins all this. So we finished our scientific study of looking at what does research say about great coaching. And this is the definition that we came up with. We called it the Integrative Definition of Quality Coaching or Effective Coaching. And every single word in this definition is there for a reason. There's no extra words in this definition. It took us about 2 years to come to this point. And really what we find when we think about quality coaching, it's the consistent application of integrated professional, interpersonal, intrapersonal knowledge to help athletes improve in their competence, confidence, connection, and character in specific coaching contexts. So you would never, I guarantee you probably would never repeat this if someone came up to you and said, hey, why do you think John's such a great coach? I think John's a great coach because he uses a consistent application of integrated. We wouldn't say that, but this is what underpins why we think John's a good coach. So I'm just going to walk you through, I'm going to break it up for you, and we're going to bring it all back together. So there's really 3 components to that definition. There's 3 pieces in there. One is the coach's knowledge, so what coaches need to know and be able to do. The second component is, what's the goal here? Be able to do what? What's the target? The target is the outcomes, the athlete outcomes. And then all of this has to be framed or situated in specific coaching contexts. So the context in which you coach will dictate what you can do and what the outcomes might look like. So we look at all these are the 3 components of good coaching. Coach's knowledge. The types of knowledge that good coaches have, we refer to these as professional knowledge, being one which is knowledge of your sport and how to teach it. So professional knowledge, knowledge of your sport and how to teach it. The interpersonal knowledge is being able to connect with people. Because we all know coaches who have they know their sport. They know football, badminton, swimming, fantastic. They might even be able to teach it, but they don't know how to connect with people. They have low emotional intelligence in a sense. So the best are able to teach it and connect with people. And the third type of knowledge that the great coaches have is intrapersonal knowledge. That's knowledge of yourself. So in a way to think of the types of knowledge we want to see with our coaches, you need to know your sport and how to teach it. You need to know your athletes and how to connect with them. And you need to know yourself, what your strengths and weaknesses are. Because the best coaches, we've done other studies too, where we found the best coaches have their coaching style is what we might call a genuine coaching style. They're the best them. They don't try and be like someone else. But you have to know yourself to be able to do that. Well, guess what? So that whole block related to coach's knowledge, those components, coach's knowledge, line up perfectly with Coach Wooden's pyramid. So the whole bottom row of the pyramid is interpersonal knowledge. Know your athletes and how to connect with them. The second row is know yourself. It's all the same thing, intrapersonal knowledge. The middle, the heart of the pyramid, is know your sport and how to teach it. So what was amazing to me is these two projects were going on separately. Different groups of people, different places in the world, and we finished them around the same time, and we put them beside each other and said, yeah, they match up. Best coach ever, best research we have, they align, they match up. So knowledge to do what? Knowledge to help our athletes develop in what ways? We call these the 4 C's. These are the 4 goals, the 4 targets that the best coaches aim for. What are the 4 C's? The first one is competence. Natural, this is where we all start. Help our athletes become a better swimmer, better archer, better football player. So sports skills. But the best coaches also help athletes develop their confidence, their belief in themselves, their ability to believe in taking risks and trying hard things and failing, right? Connection, that's the third C, helping them learn how to be a good teammate, learn how to connect with officials and administrators. And then the last one would be character, which is integrity and moral values. So the best coaches have the knowledge to do this, to build athletes across competence, confidence, connection, and character. These are the 4, think archery, these are the targets. This is what we're shooting for. This is what the best coaches do. The last piece, just to tie that in there, I was in New Zealand a little while ago, and I had a chance to connect with the All Blacks coaches, most successful sports team of all time. And I asked them about these things, and I spent time with them. And it's easy for us, if I go back here, it's easy to say, oh yeah, that's nice, Wade. We're going to build great people through sport. Well, I get evaluated if I win a medal, not if I build great people. I say, you can have it all. You can have it all. The best teams, the best coaches in the world build all 4 C's. They win and they build great people. And in fact, this is a motto that the All Blacks live by. This is one of their slogans. Better people make better All Blacks. We want to win. We want to be the best in the world, but we're going to do it with good people. And guess what? When you build good people, winning will come, and it's a lot more fun, right? The last piece then is the context. And you saw John shared this, understanding that coaching expertise, effective coaching, is context specific. So it depends on the environment I'm coaching in, how I'm going to define what that knowledge and what those outcomes look like. And John shared this with you, so I won't go into this too much. But I wanted to share this version of it. We have made a major shift, as John shared, from thinking, it wasn't that long ago, thinking that there's an expert-novice continuum in coaching. The novices are at the bottom of the food chain. The novices work with little kids. The experts are our national team and professional team coaches. We know that's not the case because someone might be great with adults coaching a professional sport team. I worked with the Portuguese soccer team when they were leading up to the World Cup, world's best player. The person coaching Ronaldo might be a terrible coach for 6-year-olds, right? So what we've done is we've flipped it so that, as John shared, you have novice to expert in every different coaching context. We have expert coaches of 6-year-olds. We have expert coaches of 8-year-olds. And so we want to connect coaches in the best way, honestly, to help coaches get better is to put them in context. So having a professional sport coach come and talk to a group of coaches with youth sport might get them motivated, and it's fun to hear those people talk, but what do they know about coaching 8-year-olds? So we want to connect them to people who coach in the same kind of context. So you put all this together, this is your definition. Great coaches have professional knowledge, interpersonal knowledge, intrapersonal knowledge, which they use to build athlete competence, confidence, connection, and character in the specific context in which they coach. This is it. This is what the best research in the world tells us. This is what the best coaches in the world do. And guess what? That's the foundation of the International Sport Coaching Framework. You see the 3 types of knowledge there listed in the heart of the framework. You see the coaching context at the top, participation and performance coaching. And you see the functions of coaching, which relates to the outcomes, how we build athletes. So the reason I share all this with you is I wanted you to know that there is alignment in the work. We're in a great place as a profession, as we're in the work of people like John and Troy, building from all these collective experiments and research and the best minds in the world. And we have a great way of thinking about good coaching at the moment. This is what I'm going to leave you with, because I'm going to do this later today. So now that we have a good sense of what good looks like, and we can talk the same language, when we say so-and-so is a great coach, we're speaking the same language. How do we get better? How do we become that kind of coach? And this is what we're going to work on in the talks later in the day. So I thank you very much for your time, and I hope we get lots of questions later today.